Zuzanna's talk will be on how to transform legal science into data science, preparing tax and legal industry for AI revolution. If you can all put your hands together for Zuzanna.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for choosing my speech. I know that we have a lot of great speakers here, so thank you for being here with me. And as it was mentioned, my speech will be, it's a very long title, so when I arrived today, they asked me, oh, what is the title of your speech, so they can identify me on the list, and I couldn't remember, so I was like, yeah, legal, tax, AI, very long, first name, last name, that's me. So my name is Zuzanna Szubartowska, and I'm a sales engineer at Loctax. So it's a startup that deals with collaboration between members of the tax team, legal team. Our platform is designed to improve collaboration and also, thanks to that, gather data that normally would get lost in translation somewhere during the processes at legal and tax processes. So just a little bit about me, so you know who you're dealing with. Also, I thought that would be quite helpful because I know that we have students here, career switchers, or people who would like to work in data science. So I'll use 3 more minutes to talk about myself before I move into more exciting things. So I graduated in the master's degree in law and finance some years ago, and as you know, I come from a good Eastern European household. I only had a chance to be a doctor or a lawyer, so I decided to be a lawyer. And long story short, I actually hated it. It was a good career, good international law firm, but I didn't enjoy it. So that's the risk you never account for when you're choosing a job, that you're actually not going to like it. So what I didn't like about it is that it was quite rigid, the structure was very hierarchical, creativity was not encouraged, innovation was not encouraged because of the system that law firms are designed. Everyone gets, your time is being charged to the client per hour, so there is no incentive for a lot of creativity and innovation, which was really painful to me. So I was talking to a lot of my friends that did jobs in tech and creative jobs, and I always envied them because they felt so passionate about their jobs and the change that they are bringing. So I started educating myself in data. I took a course in data science at Lewagon Bootcamp, where I'm currently also a lecturer at. So if you have any questions about that, also feel free to let me know. And after that, I moved into Loctax. So as I mentioned, Loctax is a startup. So I do a lot of things there, and that's what this line is about. So my role is sales engineer, but also I do a lot of different things. So that's why I wanted to talk a little bit more about that there are roles in data that are not necessarily 100% technical. They're also more, is it going to come back? Nope. Yeah, it's back. Yeah, we're good. We're good. So that's a sign I'm talking too much about myself and I need to move on, but very quickly. So also what I do is I do data advocacy. So I go around on events like this one. I speak to lawyers, I speak to tax experts, I speak to different people who come from non-technical background, and I evangelize the concept of data. I know it sounds crazy to think about it, that I need to evangelize that data is important and you can do cool stuff with it, because for you, at a data science festival, it is an obvious thing that data is important. We're all passionate about it, but it's not the case for these old school industries I work with. So I would say my role is on the intersection of these couple of areas. And why I'm talking about this is maybe because there is someone in the audience that is also thinking about a role for themselves. Maybe they do not want to go into strict software engineering, data science. There will be possibilities in the future, of course, where there will be a need for people who are non-technical, who are industry experts, and they will be able to translate the language of data into into a certain industry. So somebody who will empathize with the user, somebody who will understand really the need, why are we doing analysis, what are we forecasting for, why is it important. So I encourage you to, if this resonates with you, to also think about it broadly. And what my speech is going to be about. So because I worked with legal and tax teams on a daily basis, and often, for the very first time, they are dealing with any sort of software or data software. It's sometimes a huge change for them. Huge change management is needed to introduce these type of products, and I wanted to share my learnings, challenges, and also the state of the industry in general, if you are interested in entering it. And then in the last part of my presentation, I will talk a little bit about the future, so what the future holds for the legal industry, hopefully, and also we're gonna, I hope we're gonna have fun along the way. So part one is the legal tech, tax tech evolution. So as you know, legal and tax are very, very old industries, right? Like the first tax and legal regulation comes from 3,000 years BC, where somebody realized that there is a lot of oil, vegetable oil in the market, and it's like, well, how state makes money to provide the marketplace, we need to tax it. So that's why it got introduced. So it is a very old industry, legal as well. Legal services have been created from the Roman law times. So it is very hard to introduce change to such an established industry because things were being done in the same way for literally thousands of years. It's not like we're dealing with hundreds of years, we're dealing with literally thousands of years. So if you think about legal industry and why is it so hard to implement change there, still in the 90s or early 2000s, it was still shocking to send an email as a legal document, and because it was very hard to evidence that this was received, that the person read it, and still there was this behavioral hesitation just to believe that this is an efficient way to share information. So this is the sort of hesitance we are dealing with. And in the 2000s, late 90s, we started seeing types of software such as very simple management software to manage your practice, to manage the data in your law firm, for example, or your practice. So that sort of started shifting a little bit. But the biggest behavioral change we experienced over the pandemic, where obviously lawyers and tax advisors needed to move on with the times a little bit. And so, for example, courts were sometimes forced to go online, hearings were forced to go online. And this is a massive thing because legal and tax are very sensitive areas where sometimes a lot of conversations happen outside, inside closed doors. And typically, you don't want to have a record of everything that was said because there are different options that are being discussed. I need to remember to move my mouse around because I don't have a charger. So that's a tip for me going forwards. And now, so that's changed. That's already introduced these concepts of technology to legal and tax, saying, hello, you need to think about maybe becoming a little bit more modern going forwards. And now we are almost at a revolution because there are a lot of different types of software, such as AI research tools for legal, co-pilots, obviously, but what will happen in the future, we don't know. I will talk a little bit more about that in the last part of my presentation. So the current technology landscape of what we have in legal, I divided it into first generation and second generation software. This division does not come from me. It comes from a great book by the Susskind father and son, The Future of Professions, which I will reference at the end. But they are really great in this future thinking about what the legal landscape will be in terms of technology. So the first generation is the efficiency gains. So the first generation type of legal and tax software is taking a process that's already existing and just making it a little bit more efficient. So we are not reinventing the wheel, we're just making things a little bit better. So I put some examples of what type of software it can be. So you have your simple calculation engines here for tax, accountancy, that gathers the data that is coming from accountancy system and putting it in tax calculations, for example, for VAT purposes. Then we have the management software, as I mentioned, is one of the sort of mostly commonly used type of software where you manage something, which is your practice, your operations, your data. And my company, Loctax, is an example of that because it manages the tax function and improves collaboration between the team members. We also have knowledge databases where, let's say, in the past you would look for something in the code, you would need to have a book, but with these databases, what they do is they scrape the web for data that is publicly available, but also give you data that maybe experts are writing about, so they're compiling also expertise as well. So they are the software companies that they do something better, more efficient. Then we're moving towards the second generation where we're starting with smart contracts. So already there is still the same idea of a contract, but it's done in a more smart way. So it's being stored on blockchain or cloud-based technologies, allowing the whole company to have access to a particular type of data, which is contract. And then we have the exciting part, which is the second generation, that are implementing radical change. And as it usually is with radical change, especially in legal industry, where literally you have people that studied for years and spent thousands of dollars or pounds on their legal education, there is hesitance with that. So, for example, we have tax research tools where you can, there is an example of this is a company called BlueJ, where they have an extensive database of legal regulations. What it does, they create an agent that will answer legal questions based on your company and your company characteristics. It will take into consideration the legal landscape, and it will provide you with sort of research with regards to a topic that you are interested in. There are also legal chatbots that are aimed to replace conversations that you normally would have with an advisor. Also very controversial because nobody wants to be out of job. And also there is a question of confidentiality of the data that is being put into such chatbots. So I haven't seen a very kind of structured, commercialized product to a high extent yet in that area. So if you do know, let me know. And also, for example, case outcome prediction. So because, let's say, there is a possibility courts have massive amounts of data, they're able to map out certain situations, what is the case about, what is the matter about, and then they're able to predict with a certain degree of certainty whether what will be the outcome of that case. And of course, we have challenges. So I talked a little bit more about the second generation, all that future thinking, but as of now, when we think about our tax teams, what is the challenge with adoption in general, data software and any data products? So the first thing I observed is that the newest technologies are mostly accessed by advisory firms, leaving in-house tax teams or legal teams a little bit with limited resources. And here I put a disclaimer that here I'm going to rant about consultants. So that's what's going to happen now for about 30 seconds. So because so for those of you who don't know, you can either, let's say you're a professional service member, you can be a tax person, a legal person, you can either be in-house, so work for a company such as Facebook, you can be their in-house lawyer, or Bumble, whatever, and you are employed by that company to deal with their matters. Or you can be a consultant working for Deloitte, EY, KPMG, like I worked in the past, where you are just advising multiple firms and you have really limited responsibility for what you're providing. So the problem here happens that because these people who work for consultancies, just like me, their rotation is huge. These firms are really, really massive. They specialize in data. They work with multiple customers. They take all the learnings that they have. They're able to create products internally. For example, research engines, things that will make their work easier. Whereas in-house tax or legal teams, they do not have this possibility because usually they are not being charged to the company for a fee, right? So there is no premium on their service. They're just working for their company, contributing to their success. So why is that a problem? Is that because these companies that are consulting, they have much more resource budget to implement software, to work on software, and then they are monopolizing these solutions in the market, so then in-house tax and legal teams do not have access to that. So, for example, if I talk to in-house tax teams, sometimes it's easier for them to outsource the work to consultants because it's cheaper, for example, than hiring another person. But what that does, it moves that expertise to the consultants, which long-term is causing the influx of talent from in-house to consultancies. And this is bad, because now then consultancies have all the resources and they're monopolizing access to professional services software. Rant is over now. So then I'm moving to data is unstructured. Usually tax and legal are going to use spreadsheets, random Word documents. Data is very unstructured, and also the way of working is not streamlined. So output from every stage of the work on a legal case, on a tax return, is not structured. So data is all over the place. And also the data is not only numbers in terms of tax and legal, if you think about it, because the data is also context in which you are doing something. The data is also the business context, but also the legal context. So it's very hard to structure such data and put it in a unified format. And also, the next one is that you need to, if you want to collate all the data in the organization, in-house tax teams or legal teams are already understaffed and underpaid, and it's simply too expensive to bring certain data points digitally. It's just not something that they are able to afford. And also, as I mentioned in the before briefly, law is filed with law field is a, I don't wear my glasses, I don't know what I wrote. There's a lot of discretionary decisions, so data is mostly sensitive and confidential. So there's a lot of hesitancy about putting it in certain records on the paper. And also, often it is the case that the teams do not want to leave an audit trail of certain decisions. It's because, for example, for legal purposes, when there's this concept of negligence and carelessness, so sometimes if you act knowing that something was wrong, you are being seen as negligent, but if you just simply didn't think about something, you're being seen as careless, so the penalties can be lower. So it's a situation if something just lives in my head, it doesn't exist, so then I don't need to say that I knew about it and I didn't prove it in court. So there are a lot of these hesitancies, especially coming from the tax teams. So here, we talked about problems. I know I didn't provide any answers, but I have a good news that I'm giving more problems than answers. So part 3, Gen AI and professional services, more questions than answers, mostly questions. So you will not learn any answers, but maybe it will be a food for thought for you, just thinking about problems that, why is it that the legal and tax industry is so poorly digitalized? So coming back to the slide from before, so when we talked a little bit more about the hesitance in implementing the first generation tools, but what is the hesitance in implementing the second generation tools? So, for example, it is legal industry. We need to think about it really carefully, what it means to implement Gen AI solutions or any sort of second generation technology. So we have this gap between technology and the legislation. So technology already can do so much, and it can be very accurate, but the legislation is still lagging. So what does it mean? That if we are introducing technology right now, there will be this Wild West type of scenario where everyone can do whatever they want until it gets regulated. So that's one problem. If we are equipping tax or legal teams with certain tools, and then in a couple of years, the legislation will keep up, what is going to happen? Maybe certain things that will be done now, maybe they will not be seen as legal. We don't know. So that's one of the problems. Also, in law, the thought process often, how you get to a certain decision, it must be explained. So it is very hard for, let's say we're putting a question into ChatGPT-based model, and then it comes up with an answer. But then in law, it doesn't work like that. It cannot just say that this is the most probable answer based on an LLM. It needs to show these steps, step by step. So that's also something that can be problematic, and it is a difference between how a lawyer would work and how a language model would work, for example. Also, how do we make sure that AI is replying to questions in the spirit of law and not making use of legal loopholes? So that's also something that's a bit of an esoteric topic. The spirit of law, it is something that all law students learn about, but it's very hard to tell a language model to reply in the spirit of law, and also to what extent it should, given that it is an LLM model. So it is also something that they would be answering, the model would be answering the question in the best way, but is it always the best way? We also don't know. And yeah, exactly, can we trust AI with making the best decision if it's not the most likely one? So sometimes the best decision legally is maybe not the most common decision, it's not the decision that would normally be made, but in the light of the broader legal strategy of the company, it would make sense. So it is hard to fine-tune it in the way that it would make sense. Obviously, we can, let's say, fine-tune the model so it answers the question and provides the answers along with the company strategy. But then we're coming back to the audit trail problem. If we train the model so it answers question in a certain way, then maybe in the future, the tax authorities or any other authorities would have the freedom to inquire what are the inputs of that model. So maybe this also would be an evidence in the future. So we have a lot of unknowns here. And again, will humans be willing to confide in machines rather than other human beings because of that fact that there is always an audit trail of everything that's happening? My concept about it is that in the future, that's what's going to happen. So let's say in a tax dispute that I used to work at in the past, there will be a situation where if there is a model that the members of the team use to answer legal questions, if I was tax authorities, the first thing I would look at is that model and the inputs that it was trained on. So that is something that maybe will come in the future. And also a question that I really think about on a daily basis. So that's how you know that my life is very exciting, if this is things I think about every day. Can AI really advise? So AI makes decisions, Gen AI makes on statistics rather than reason. But does it always mean it's not reliable? So there is this notion that we need to, as I talked about a couple of times, that it needs to think about the spirit of law, the strategy, the reason, all of these. But is it really necessary? Because at the end of the day, if we took an output created by a human lawyer tax advisor, and we took output created by a model, and they are the same, are we really interested how they got to that model? I mean, we need to know the steps. If steps are the same that they took in thinking about this, do we really care? It is a bit of a breakthrough to think about it, but what we need is a reliable outcome, regardless of how we got there in the end. And this is also something that comes from the Future of Professions lectures by Professor Susskind, that we need to step away from the anthropocentric view of experience. So that means that we are glorifying right now what the humans are saying, but what the human is saying, it also can be biased, flawed in the same way as an output from a language model. So we need to really think about whether we're glorifying it because it was answered by a human or because it was the best answer. This is a question I, as promised, will not answer. And also, what does it mean in case of how should we change the ways we're training young professionals? Does that mean that we need to stop training lawyers, tax advisors? We can just leave all the knowledge-based professions to systems and just leave it? Again, I don't have the answer for that. But there will be in the future a problem where young professionals will have it a little bit more difficult, far more difficult to enter the market because the simple routine jobs will be replaced, for example, by tools such as BlueJ, which will do the initial research. So we need to think about what is the expertise that is needed, what is the routine task versus the task that needs a human intervention, and it is also important in building the future job market, especially in legal. So I'm almost out of time, so at the end I'm going to leave you with recommendations so you can also spend all your days thinking about the spirit of law and all this really fun stuff. So I quoted a lot Future of Professions by Susskind and Susskind, father and son, very good one. This is also a very good one if you're interested in the future of justice and broadly professional services as well. The predictive mind is an interesting one to answer a question, can AI really advise? And it's a very interesting conclusion that actually at the end of the day, the machine learning models do not work very dissimilar to actually how our brain works. So there is a little bit of a neuroscience there. And then for the haters out there, such as myself, there is the big con about why we should be careful with the consultancies. And if you would like to stay in touch, rant together a little bit, or if you want to discuss or brainstorm any ideas, here are my contact details. Thank you very much for your attention. And now we're taking questions, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Zuzanna. That was great. I'm going to come around with the mic. So, start the questions.
Thanks for the talk. Very thought-provoking. I have a question. Like you mentioned in your slide, in law, the thought process must be explained. Surely, with the current LLMs, it does give an impression of kind of step-by-step reasoning. I've been trying a few of them, even the big ones, and sometimes they sound quite logical, but either they use the wrong facts or there's a fault in their reasoning.
Yeah.
So do you envisage a way around it in the future or currently?
I mean, that's a very good question. And exactly, sometimes you're looking at the steps it's taken and they're simply wrong. So that's also something that we need to think about, whether we are, in the future, will we glorify the outcome or the steps that took us there? So maybe we can forgive the model for making mistakes in the steps if at the end it will come to the right outcome. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe we need to fine-tune a little bit more using an agent, so maybe we can create different agents with different type of expertise that would work together to create those steps as well. So these will be, I think, my thoughts how this could be handled.
Yeah.
Thanks, excellent talk. I participated in an event a couple of months ago where the keynote mentioned one of the key problems in this sector is the fact that we are still obeying laws that are words written on paper that require interpretation and reinterpretation and finding, and in an era where queries and data have existed for dozens of years now. So one of the potential futures that this gentleman was seeing was algorithmic laws, where compliance is binary and not subject to interpretation. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about that.
So that's also something that I'm going to quote the spirit of law, right? So if we are talking about the binary, yes, guilty, not guilty, yes, there is a penalty, no penalty, then we would need to rethink law as a system 3,000 years back, where the principle is that we're assuming that somebody is not guilty unless proven, or for example, if that everyone has the right to defend, and that is the rule in tax, in civil law, and all the laws. So if there is some sort of body that will decide that based on facts, who is interpreting those facts, who is putting the binary number, because at the end of the day, there always needs to be a decision, because the data that we have in legal, it's not binary either. It's documents, it's words. So somebody will have to make a decision, how do we encode those data as well. So this is just, the decision will be just moved to that point. And we're faced with the same dilemma at the end of the day. So I would say that it's a great future where everything is predictable like that, but I would then think that all the interpretation will just move to a different step down the chain, which will be much sooner.
Okay, any more questions? Yeah, go to the easy ones first.
I think something I wanted to see is, let's say if we start trusting the model, but then there would be some kind of inherent bias in the model. For example, model is trained on whatever data you have, and data is biased towards, let's say, one particular race or something. So the poor quality data you have, poor quality of model you'll produce. So how do you see that will be tackled in future? And I have another question.
So I love this question because this comes back to what I said in the beginning, that in the future there will be a lot of roles that will be needed, such as AI ethics specialist, social specialist, so all the non-technical roles that will also help train these models and see what is the best way, the most socially just way to balance the data, for example. Is it something about data balancing? Is it something about the inputs? So I would see very critical need for roles that would ensure social justice in training.
And I totally agree with the compliance and regulations and everything. But what I see that we keep on talking about regulations in Europe, and I see, we had Google I/O talk this Tuesday, and now each and every of the product is using AI, generative AI and AI. Every company is moving there. So they are leaping ahead, and we are always talking about regulations. In fact, I think there was one company, Harvey AI, which is again a big startup, or I don't know, old company, law-based company. So they are pretty big on using LLMs and GenAI in law practice. So how come they are tackling that issue and we are not able to do that?
So that's the question. That's the unfortunately bias in general in the law system, that we have things as lobbyists and we have these big bodies that are able to influence the governments that are from the private sector. That's something that is a way bigger issue of the government as a whole, that they are private bodies that can benefit from certain things that have influence over the legislators. So I don't have answer to that, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Thank you for the interesting talk. So we can see in your slide, we got that efficiencies improved in the first wave, and also the Gen AI in the second. So most of the application we can see to now using AI, machine learning is for decision support system. So we're talking about will AI replace human totally in here most of the time, but then what you think about human and AI working together? So most of the time it will be decision support system. It could be even Gen AI will just skim through all the documentation, legal file to give information to chat for the lawyer to improve their efficiencies, do things better. And then that would be the near future, right? The AI, which we call the artificial general AI intelligence, will be there, but then very, very long time, especially in the area of safety or legal. So what do you think about that? The human and AI working together instead of like we just say AI replace everything.
So I think that's the scenario that would be ideal, because then we will have the AI that will look for data, will identify patterns, will surface these patterns, the data to the user, and then the human can do the empathizing, the decision making, the proper decisions. So it would sort of outsource the routinized work of going through legislation, and then it will just leave the most important things. And that's where humans need to be, because at the end of the day, to make the decisions, we need to always have context, empathy, and all these factors that at this moment algorithms do not have. So definitely collaboration is something that would be the best outcome, I would say here.
Yeah, because like both human and AI, we got the strength and weaknesses. So
Yeah.
depend on like the power of each side. Like human might be really good on some aspect on the humanity side, thing, emotion. But then yeah, we cannot analyze a lot of data and then do it quickly as well. So yeah, I think that's might related to some of the answer to some of your questions there in the near future, not like in the long term. But then
Yeah, that's right. I
direction
agree.
might be something we can discuss more later on.
Yeah.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
As advances in AI develop, such as the ability for systems to reason and perform logic, do you foresee this having an impact on legal tech in terms of not replacing lawyers, but having more of an impact on and reliable decision making as well?
Yes, it will definitely, as discussed before, it would probably need to be that synergy between a lawyer or an advisor and the system that would surface, let's say, certain regulations. The only worry is that also the job market needs to keep up with that. So training of the junior lawyers, of junior advisors need to be done differently, and it's definitely something that will be beneficial. But as I said, it's a very old industry. The change comes very, very slow. So what my worry is that the technology will be going really fast, and then the social change will be a little bit lagging behind.
Thank you.
Thanks. That was really thought-provoking. I'm also not the biggest fan of consultants. My question is, what would your advice be for those just starting a career in legal or tax?
So this is a great question, because I would focus on data and also the digital aspect of the job. So not coming into the profession just with a thought, okay, I'm just going to cram all these codes, I'm going to learn how to do it theoretically, but also what is the practical implication of that? Maybe how will I manage a database of these type of data? Maybe thinking how, if we are working on a massive amount of audit data, audit outcomes, how do we use it to maybe make better decisions or see certain patterns? So thinking with this forward-thinking mindset. And also what I am hoping that in universities also that the emphasis on memorizing, researching in that way would be moved to critical thinking about things, because that will be the skill of the future. Because if the systems will be able to do all of that, do the tax research for us, our one important skill is the critical thinking and be able to analyze things in context. So I would say these are the most important skills.
Thank you.
Hi, I just want to ask, so from what I've heard about the legal industry, a lot of the times is charged by hours. So that's why a lot of the time there's like a resistance towards adopting technologies that would improve efficiency and effectiveness, because that would mean that the length of time that it takes for them to do the work will like go down. That means less money and less income from that perspective. Do you think like that is something that needs to change quite radically in the industry, so that people are more like less resistant to sort of improving their efficiency, which in a way is like sort of harming their revenue and profitability. And another one is like I think maybe I'm a bit biased because I used to be a consultant, and I feel like being a consultant sort of you do learn a wide range of like skills and abilities before you go. And a lot of consultants do go into industry by the end of their tenure, so they bring a lot of the sort of wide range of skills into like corporates, into in-house teams. So yeah, I guess this is less related to this, but. Yeah, maybe I feel like maybe there is sort of positives to have consultants because they will go into industry and bringing their experience to in-house teams.
Yeah, great questions. Great questions from a fellow consultant. So the first question about the chargeable rates, I think this is the most warped, backward system that could ever exist, where you're being charged by hour of your work, so that does not encourage efficiency at all. But what is happening right now is that consultancies have all the tools developed internally, they use them for their own benefits and having these efficiencies, but they would still charge based on what is the fair market price. So it is a little bit of a scam that they are not making these tools available, for example, for their clients, but they're using it for internal efficiency. So that's definitely something that it does increase innovation, but within the consultancy itself. So it's not really beneficial for the outside. Also, consultancies they buy a lot of startups for their technology as well. So because they have funds to do that, so they're just accumulating all the knowledge. So that's the innovation internally is possible to be generated like that. But the only hope I would see for that if from the consultancy somebody would leave and spread the good news, which also links to your second question, that move from consultancies to in-house, that I think is critical to make sure that the in-house tax and legal teams are also have these expertise. The problem is always the budget, because the companies would rather pay a consultant sometimes than invest in their own team. So the direction of travel is a little bit difficult sometimes, especially sometimes I know a lot of people had to take a pay cut to go to in-house comparing to consultancies because of these margins. Consultancy pays are way more, were higher. So it is a warped system a little bit, but definitely I still can see hope, especially there are much more legal technology, tax technology teams that are developed in-house. So I know there is a tax technology team in Deliveroo, in Facebook, so they are developing their own talent, their own technology tools that they're able to invest in their own people. So that's the good news.
So when let's say a legal department or along those kind of lines are integrating AI, things like AI for the first time or new technology, what specific pitfalls or risks are there involved with that? I mean, in terms of things like lawyer-client confidentiality, what are the sort of potential risks that you don't think people are talking about enough, and any potential strategies for resolving them?
So do you mean in the consultancy or in-house team?
For in-house.
So the biggest risk is just that people will not use it, that I observe from my work as someone who is implementing these technologies. So it is sometimes the fact that, let's say, it's a part of a broader strategy that the team needs to get digitalized, and then at the end of the day, it's very hard to implement this change, behavior change. So this, I would say, is the biggest risk, because at the end of the day, we can put structures around data safety, all of that, security, but just is the human element that is always the biggest risk, because then you can spend money on software, spend money on change management, but at the end of the day, if it's not adopted, then it will just go back to how it was, which is worse than if nothing was done at all, because the morale goes down, and then people think, okay, we saw that this doesn't work, we saw that it doesn't make sense, and we are going back to the old ways. So I would say the biggest risk is always the human element not picking up. So if I would implement technology, I would make sure that there is these soft measures being put, how to incentivize people to use it, what to make sure to that the processes are picked up in the way that is intended to by the team.
Great, thank you.
I think we have time for one more question right at the back.
Hi, thanks. Is there a geographic element to the maturity in challenges and questions that you've raised?
It is an interesting question, because in the last couple of months I was at a little bit of a road tour where I was evangelizing the concepts of data in legal and tax to different jurisdictions. I was in the Middle East, I was in the US, I also do talks and talk to people in Europe as well. And what I noticed that there is a level of confidence that goes with these undertakings. So for example, from what I observed in the US, it's easier to implement this change because people are so enthusiastic about, yes, we can definitely do it, we can definitely gather the data. It's just more of a can-do approach. Whereas, for example, in Europe, people sometimes are a little bit hesitant. They do not believe in their own abilities to pick up new software. So for example, if you have tax or legal team where everyone has 20 years of experience, they're thinking, maybe this is a bit difficult. So I would say these are cultural, definitely cultural things. In terms of the legislation, obviously we have the EU legislation versus different US legislation, so I cannot really comment on that as it's not fully developed yet as of now, but the behavioral factors definitely they do vary depending on different jurisdictions. Also, I want to say something interesting about South America, that because there are so much legislation there, Brazil is one of the systems that has most different taxes based on state, based on different city, based on different function. So people there are so, I would say, desperate for something that will guide them, especially if they're, for example, dealing with tax. So they will accept anything that will help them. So I know a lot of fintech startups are now dealing with that, with managing of tax regulation landscape in South America, because there's so much there and not a lot of software response. So it's definitely connected to geography and the complexity of legal systems as well, for sure.
Brilliant. If we could all put our hands together again for Zuzanna. We're going to now stop for a short break. So we're going to resume talks in the backspace at 11. So yeah, if you want to go outside, get a coffee, we'll be back in about half an hour. So thank you all for coming, and thanks Zuzanna for such a great talk.
Thank you.